Electric Cafe.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Electric Cafe. Today's album review is on Berlin's debut album called Information, which came out in 1980. This is their second time on the channel. I did review Pleasure Victim, which is up there, my sister's original copy from 1982, right there. So I grew up with Berlin. I grew up with that album. Um, I give that album a 65 out of 100. You know, it's right in the middle of a good album. In some ways, it would probably be in the 70s, probably closer to a very good album. Obviously, 'cause it's got some classic songs on there with The Metro and Sex Emma and Masquerade. It's got some, and Pleasure Victim. It's got, four really solid singles on it, but then it has an extended version of Sex Emma and then like two or three other songs. So at the most, it had like seven or eight songs. So generally, I don't um, knock off points or add any points for any longer album or shorter album. But when you think about if there's a dud on the album or if there's a couple songs that are okay, which Pleasure Victim had a couple okay tracks, it's really going to hurt the album because there's not that many songs. Um, and so that's the reason why I scored it a little bit lower than I feel like the album is in some ways. Um, I don't know if I'll ever review their third album. You know, they obviously went a little bit more poppy in the third album, but I wanted to go back and and review their first album. And Information was only released at the time in Germany, and still it hasn't been reissued, and it's still a fairly underground album, and in some ways it's kind of um, has a cult status, in some ways as well for its appeal to people that are interested about new wave and the history of new wave and things like that. And when I think about like my music journey, I'm very into the history of electronic music and trying to find out, who was inspired by who and how things evolved in certain scenes in different cities and especially in the most thing in different genres. And growing up through the 80s, I kind of felt like I knew pretty much everything for the most part, as I grew up through the 80s. And then sort of into the 90s, I kind of was still, also looking what was coming out, but also still filling in the pieces of music acts that I like and finding new artists along the way. But by the mid 90s, I pretty much felt like for the most part, knew everything about, I mean, there's things here and there, but for the most part, knew about everything when it comes to new wave artists. So, towards the later 90s, I got more into like new age music and trying to find the history of ambient music and experimental music and all the way back to the late 60s and quite a few of those albums I've already reviewed, things like Tonto's Head Expanding Project, and I haven't done Silver Apples yet, but I've done some Tangerine Dream and Can and Cluster and things like that, and Conrad Schnitzel and all kinds of things like that. And so I've kind of gone back that way. All along the way, I've gone back towards house and any kind of trance that I didn't know about, or the history of techno and the history of electro, anything I missed in those genres, and a lot of other subgenres. But just in the past like 5 to 10 years, I've kind of with kind of being a little bit, you go through different periods of kind of going back into what you're interested in and digging a little bit more in that area and see if there's anything that you missed. And sometimes you'll hear something really exciting and excuse me, and it'll kind of re-inspire you to see if there's anything else you missed. And doing this channel, I've been also DJing a lot of more new wave events in the last couple of years, and and also being discouraged by the techno scene in the last 10 years, and also a lot of other styles have been a little stagnant for me personally. So I've kind of gotten back a lot more into finding some new age albums that I didn't know, and so many things in the 70s and 80s, and that's kind of why I'm doing this review on Berlin. It was an album that I had never got a chance to listen to, and I didn't even know it really existed until until just recently. And so I thought I'd come and review it. It's an interesting album. Obviously, it has Virginia, is it Masolino on vocals instead of Terry Nunn. And in some ways, she comes from. She also did a an album under the title lead singer as the title of Sex, Drug, and Noise by a band she was in called Beast of Beast, and they were a Southern California punk band a couple years after this album, and she kind of has that kind of interesting kind of punk sound that made this album very very interesting in some ways. Because they are still new wave, but she brings in a different style, and it creates a very unique sound, especially for the time. The unfortunate thing is the songs aren't as strong as Berlin's second album, and but they are interesting. And probably a lot of the lore of this album, or anybody who finds this album like groundbreaking or anything like that, it's probably because it's a very unknown album. Um, I think the sounds kind of warrant it to be an interesting album, and there's some highlights in here. But as far as the overall album, it's I have it pretty good and in the 50s, and I don't mind giving my score right now. I gave it a 55 out of 100, which is right in the middle of pretty good. Um, but when I look at the overall tracks, there's some highlights, but there's some tracks that are like you know, and I would encourage you guys to listen to it and see what you guys think as well. But there's definitely sort of like a mix. It's 1980. It's Los Angeles. New wave has just kind of come on the scene in the last year or so. Um, I remember at the time I was I was big into like I think I was like 4 years old in 1980, and I remember very fondly like liking My Sharona by the Knack, and then also you had Romantics, and you had I think Talking Heads were kind of just getting a little popular around then, and Motels and things like that. And there was some bands that were sort of verging into new wave, and of course you had B-52s, which were super popular. And I was lucky enough to go around K Rock radio station, and already by 81, 82, they're already playing a lot of new wave and lesser known bands that your Oingo Boingo, your B-52s and stuff like that. And there was already a sort of punk was kind of finishing, or kind of losing a little bit of steam in the hardcore punk as far as being in the pop scene, but they were still kind of involving other styles into it. And so this is an interesting album. There's a little bit of like track 5 has a little bit of a ska bounce to it. Certainly track 10, Uncle Sam, sort of sounds a little bit like Rock Lobster. Track number 3, Overload, sounds a little bit like Gary Newman or John Fox. It has a little bit of a darker edge, but it's a little bit of a light punk. Um, just some interesting sounds. Track number 6, Talk Talk Video. She sings a little bit like Lena Lovitch. There's also some vocoder sounds in track 1 and number 6, where it kind of sounds like the Buggles, or a little bit of sort of robotic voice. Even Del Bosio kind of has that kind of voice in there. So there's a lot of inspiration in here about other new wave bands that were going on at the same time, and that seems perfectly natural. Um, to be inspired by other bands at that time, because everybody was so new. And yeah, I think this album is something that you have to listen to, and just kind of pick out the tracks that you like, and kind of add them to your playlist, or your new wave underground set list or something like that. I'll certainly do that with a couple tracks myself, but I don't think I'd ever buy this album, or really listen to this album in full. When I look at the tracks and rate them, It starts out with some potential in the sounds, but the songs just aren't there. Um, it's kind of well. I'll also say there's kind of a mix of a little bit of. It sounds a little bit like Yellow or Telex, sort of mixing in Devo with Sparks and then again B-52s. And there's a strange mix of ska and punk and new wave. So it is very Los Angeles in all those inspirations of those sounds at the time. It sounds very much like a Los Angeles new wave album. When I look at the tracks individually, though, Mind Control, I give it 4 and 3/4 stars. It's an okay track. It's exciting. It has an exciting edge, but musically a bit frantic. And that's kind of first track I heard. I thought of Lena Lovitch because it's kind of she kind of has an erratic singing to it, and again there's sort of like a little ska influence in there and a little punk, so it's a little bit of um, almost just kind of frantic and a little bit erratic. Um, yeah, track number 2, Modern Welt, probably my least liked song on the album, 4 stars. And so I got it at the bottom of okay. There's nothing that's like horrible on here or bad or it's just there's a lot of okay and good tracks and a couple and one very good track basically. But it's like it starts out exciting with the sounds, but the songs really just don't they just don't get there for me. And then finally in track 3 is the first sign of something good. I give this one 6 and 1/4 stars. It's called Overload. It sounds a little Gary Newman, John Fox like, a little darker of an edge and a little bit more punk, a little bit of light punk. But 6 and 1/4 stars. It's one of my favorites.
Millions of city lights burning bright in the night. Too many circuits unplugged to machines. Neon lights disengage. Television is the rage. Life support systems supporting every need. Where are you going when the lights flicker? It's a power failure on overload. The lights are out tonight. Children in the darkness, hearing lovers play their games. Babies crying, people fighting, looters all in a rage. Too many circuits unplugged to machines. Atomic reactors, space technology. Where are you going when the lights flicker? It's a power failure on overload. The lights are out tonight.
Track number 4 is my favorite, called City Lights. This one is the direction they should have probably gone in. Probably they sort of did on the second album. This one sounds City Lights sounds a little bit like Masquerade. Like the changes are like that. It's a little bit of punk, has some edge, but it's smoother and it has a good guitar, a little heavier, and it actually progresses really well. Like the Metro does. It is kind of a precursor to where they're going on their second album. And it's the best song on the album. I think 7 and 1/4 stars. I think it's a very good track.
A man walks in through the door, takes a look as he passes through the wall. On and on, electrically and
have Five, which is another good track. 6.25 stars for the title track called Information. This almost has, like I was saying earlier, it has a little bit of ska bounce to it. Good pacing though, interesting sound to have this kind of guitar being played over a ska beat. It's really unique, and it has a good atmosphere as well. And that was those are the three good tracks, and one very good track, right in the middle there, tracks 3, 4, and 5.
So it's a numbers game. Every number has a name. Doesn't mean a lot to me. I just know my number's three. Hear a voice on the other line. Communication seems real fine. Do I hear a little detection? We can't seem to make a Sorry, sir, your number's changed. Your life is prearranged. Numerical terrorism, or mental vandalism. Doesn't matter how it's worded. You give your love to the main circuit. Let me switch your chemicals, and I'll tell you what you mean. Someone's calling on the telephone. Someone's calling and they won't leave me alone. I've gotta give you some information.
And unfortunately, the album, stays pretty consistent in the okay range to pretty good. It's not bad, but nothing really sticks out. Track 6, Talk Talk Video, 4.25 stars. Fascination, which was a single, 5.25 stars. A Matter of Time, which was also the second single, 5 stars. Middle Class Suicide, 4.5 stars. And Uncle Sam, 4.25 stars. So the album ends for the most part in the okay range. Just nothing really that sticks out. And so overall, the album is 51.75 stars for a 51.7. I gave the album a couple extra points for it is ahead of the time, and I do very much like the singer in the album, Virginia is a Massolini. It almost makes me kind of wonder what happened to her. Like, she went from this and then to the punk band, and she stood out on the punk band as well. I feel a little bit sad that she didn't go into another. Um, she didn't continue singing from what I looked up. It didn't look like there was any additional really music that bands that she was in that she fronted. But I think she's a really powerful singer, and so I gave the album a couple extra points because of her, because of some futuristic sounds in here, and there's some potential on here, and some decent kind of guitar riffs. So I gave, yeah, a couple extra points, and I'm finished at a 55 out of 100, right in the middle of a pretty good album. Again, it's something that you want to check out if you're into like really very early new wave. If you're looking for something that kind of ties punk into new wave, and um, maybe like a lesser known B-52's album, or again, a little bit of Yellow and Telex and Devo and Sparks and Lena Lovitch and Gary Newman. You get a little bit of all that in here, even a little bit of John Fox in here. And some of the darker stuff is stuff I like. Like obviously City Lights is a little bit more like vaporwave. I could see that tying into the scene of that right now, and maybe even Overload and the track information. Those three songs are my favorite, and those are I feel like the strongest tracks. The rest of the album has some highlights in the sounds, and it's interesting, but just the tracks don't really kind of they're not really that good. I don't know how to say it. It's just I don't know if they lack potential or they just don't get there, but they just don't really stand out in any way. It's just it's a little bit too. It's a little bit unfortunate that the album is so from a sound from an instrumental from the instruments perspective, like the sound and the style they're doing and the different unique sounds that they're doing for the time is very ahead of the time and right on the cusp of what was happening. But it's too bad that the songs are still so poppy. It would be nice if there was like some more experimentalism going on, maybe more edge, or maybe going with one specific style and sort of going with it. It seems like they're trying maybe a little bit too much, and nothing is like over the top great. But the things that are good or very good, probably if they would have done a little bit more of that, then the album would have been a little bit more successful and consistent overall. But still an interesting album. I'm glad I got a chance to check it out. Curious to know if you've heard this album and what you thought of it. But I think it's a pretty good album. I gave it a 55 out of 100. If there's something of yours that you like me to review, just email me below and give me your suggestion on what I should review next. And I would appreciate it. All right, thanks so much.
He went